How to grow business regardless of markets is the topic for today's session. And this clearly is something which is of great interest to distributors. Because if we were to look at it, the biggest external factor impacting the fortunes of the distributors is perhaps the markets. Okay, while it is not within the control of anyone, but it has an overbearing impact on their business. And this is something which all distributors keep grappling with. When the markets are good, uh, AUMs keep growing, investors keep coming, and everyone's having a good time. However, once the tide turns, we find that investors shy away. Not only do investors shy away, they redeem their money. And on top of it, there is the fall in assets because of markets, the mark to markets. And hence, there is a decline in the income of the distributors. So there is a double whammy at work. So today, uh, I'm going to be talking to Pradeep about what can be done to overcome this. Not only do we want to overcome this situation, we also want to thrive in it. Okay. So let me start with Pradeep on a uh, different note, actually. Pradeep, what is your view on the markets currently?
Firstly, thank you, Prem, for having me on your program. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to the advisor friends. Yeah, I think view on the market, hasn't changed as we have been seeing. See, if you're talking about the equity market, our view, the medium to long term view is certainly positive. Uh, in the next 3 to 5 years, we believe that people can make very respectable amount of money in the equity market. Our belief, especially after a healthy correction today, is that the equity markets, are at a slight discount to their fair value. Because as a fund house at Union Mutual Fund, we go by the fair value approach, and our view is that the markets are not at a premium. The market is if anything, it's at a slight discount to fair value, which means from here onwards, the market should grow in line with the fair value of companies, and with the expectation that the economic activities will recover in 2021. And by, say, about March 2022, we must be somewhere close to the pre-COVID levels, which means a significant recovery in economic activities. We believe that the equity markets offer good potential. Okay, that obviously doesn't mean that every stock will go up or every sector will go up, but market as a whole and good funds should be able to give good returns. Coming to the fixed income market, because very often, and I'll come back to this point, later on also, because when we say market, people have a tendency to just think about the equity market. While we all know that that's not the case, fixed income is equally important. In fixed income also, our view is positive. We believe that we are headed for softer interest rate regime, which means scope for gains in the bond funds. So if you have good quality corporate bond funds or dynamic bond funds, there is scope to make money, in especially in the medium term bucket, particularly because we believe that the spread between 5 year and 1 year government bonds, for example, which is today at about 190 basis points, and has been historically at 50 basis points, there is significant scope for compression, which also offers a good potential for people to make money. So the view both on fixed income and equity is positive at this stage.
Okay. Okay, so we start on an optimistic note, uh, or rather, can I call it a cautiously optimistic note?
Well, you always need caution in investments, but we are optimistic.
Okay.
Caution is built in.
Okay. Okay, good. So, many advisors believe that it is their job to provide returns to investors. What is your views on this?
Well, I don't know whether the audience will really, like this or not. Returns are not given by advisors. Okay, returns are fundamentally given by the markets. Okay, not even by the fund managers. I would say returns are fundamentally given by the markets. But the advisors play a big role in helping the investors to, really enjoy the returns from the market by guiding them appropriately. Their job, see, it's a journey which the investor has to undertake. The investment is a journey for the investor, but the advisor or the distributor, by whatever name you call them, they are the guides on the way. They hold the hands of the investor when needed. They make sure that the investors reach their goals, reach their destinations. So that, to me, is really the role of the advisor, not just to give the returns.
So,
Returns are, yes, it's a part of that.
okay. So you believe that distributors should focus more on goal planning rather than focus so much on returns, because a lot of conversation between the clients and distributors is around कितना मिलेगा, ये फंड में इतना मिलेगा, इसमें तो आप इतना लेके चलो. Would that be a correct view? What is your view on this?
See, first and foremost, Prem, I believe that the job of the advisor, the primary role, is to keep the investor in a financially healthy stage. Okay, is like a doctor. If the job of a doctor is to make sure that the patient, a person remains healthy physically, I think the financial advisor needs to see her role or his role as one in which financially the investor remains healthy, they are able to meet their goals. Okay, so the goal doesn't mean that it's always a long-term goal. You can have a goal in 3 months time, 6 months time, 2 years time. You can also have a 20-year goal. So I believe that unless the advisors or the distributors graduate away from the earlier practice of just recommending funds, it's difficult to grow the business. You see, today, if you see yourself as just somebody who recommends the best performing fund to the investor, it's not really a sustainable model. See, the point is just selection of funds. If that is the only thing involved, many people, today's generation, particularly I would say people under 50, would one day do it on their own, because there is so much of information available through various websites, magazines, etc., to choose the best performing fund, which itself is a questionable strategy, and I have strong views on that. But I'm saying if you go by that, it's something that people will someday do on their own and decide that I don't need an advisor for this. So that is really not the job. That is just one part of the job, incidental. Okay, so it's like saying which flight to take. Yeah, which flight to take is one part of it, but the main thing is your journey, your destination. Are you reaching safely? Are you reaching on time, etc.? So the point is scheme selection or kitna milega is one small part of it. So we have to look at the bigger picture. Okay, you need to really, as an advisor, get a full grip on the client, that who is really my client, what are his aspirations, what are his real needs, what are the aspirational requirements, what is it that he can afford to have, what is it that he will achieve if he stretches, where is it that he can cut down on expenses, where is it that he cannot cut down on expenses. This kind of questions need to be asked, and prepare a plan, help the investor to really reach those goals. And yes, for that, then you choose, which are the most appropriate funds. Any category, whether it's equity or fixed income, or hybrid, you can always make assumptions about what kind of returns you can expect. There's nothing wrong in it. Because when we make a calculation, yeah, we may say that, equity on an average, is expected to give me 12%. You may be completely wrong. It may give 8%, it may give 15, 20%. But you can have assumptions like in any strategy. And if, assumptions go wrong, yeah, you modify your strategy. It's like Google Map. You start with, what is available today. And on the way, if you find that there is a traffic block, Google Map will dynamically rework and it will suggest an alternative route. So like that, you can change your strategy, but start with a certain assumption about the possible return, nothing wrong in it. But let the returns not be the cornerstone of your advice to the customer. See, I'll give you, just one.
You alluded.
Yeah, please. Sorry, Prem.
No, please. You were saying you wanted to.
So
you make it a point.
See, just to give you one personal example, because I am also an investor. I may be running an AMC, but I am also an investor in mutual funds. Okay, I have bulk of my, vast majority of my investments in mutual funds. Out of that, of course, vast majority of my investments in Union Mutual Fund, and more than 90% of my portfolio is through advisors, IFIs. So I think I can speak with some authority on what an investor is looking for. So what did my advisor do? He came, sat with me, because I am fully capable of selecting a fund on my own. I don't need somebody to just help me to select a fund. But the point is, my advisor came, sat with me and my whole family, understood what we need, understood our income levels, understood what our long-term plans are, medium plans are, what are the constraints, etc. And then told us what is achievable and how it is achievable. And that is where we started, we developed faith in the advisor. And more importantly, one thing which he did, and I'm not saying that, this works in every situation, is the advisor himself, opened up his portfolio and showed us, this is where I have invested in. And this has been my experience over the last 10 years. And I think that goes a long way in convincing the client. It works in many, I would say in most situations. If you as an advisor, show that you are willing to walk the talk, I think, many investors would really appreciate that.
Okay. But, Pradeep, there's a small contradiction. You said that it is not possible to, you alluded to the fact that it's not possible perhaps to pick the best performing funds. You can do that only at hindsight.
Yes.
Is that correct? Is that what you meant?
Yes. The search for a best performing fund is a search for the holy grail. You will never find it.
Okay. So what would be your advice to the distributors, to our audience today, if you feel that it is not possible to pick up the best performing funds? Okay. Then what is it that they should do? Forget about goal planning. But if I'm suggesting the advisor has determined along with the client that these are the goals which have to be pursued. Okay. And now some fund selection has to be done. On what criteria should the fund selection be done?
So I would say, first and foremost, avoid the outliers. Any fund which is doing exceptionally well, completely, out of the ordinary, because say the category average is 15% and somebody is giving you 25% or 30%, I would say be very cautious. At least ask the question, how is this being produced? Similarly, in fixed income, if category average is 8%, one fund is giving 12%, at least ask the question, how this is being produced. And if you get a convincing reply, yes, please go and invest in that fund. If you don't get a convincing reply, stay away. Similarly, outliers on the lower side, if there are funds which are consistently doing badly, for whatever reason, stay away. Okay, if you choose a fund which is consistently above average, I think that should be good enough. Because like I said, bulk of the returns are given by the market. Okay, 80% of your returns will come from the market. The rest 20% is what the fund manager gives. Okay, you need somebody who is consistent, not the top performer. Top performer, there is no guarantee. It's like a race. There's no guarantee who's going to win the race. Everybody runs, everybody tries to win. But look for a fund house with a process. See, the process is the only thing that that can be replicated. The individual fund manager's brilliance is like the form of a batsman. He may be in form one day, he may be out of form the next day. So don't go by that, that star concept. Look at a fund house which has a process and is producing consistent returns. And there are enough fund houses in our industry which is doing that. So it is possible to choose fund houses with, consistent returns. And secondly, look for funds which are true to label. So for example, if you go for a large cap fund, if that's what you want, while SEBI said that, you had to have minimum 65%, 80% in large cap funds. See whether your large cap funds always at 80%, or is it, closer to 100% in large cap? Or are they packing, the 20% with mid and small cap always? Similarly, in a mid cap category, the minimum is 65% in mid cap. Is your fund house always at 65% mid cap and putting 30-35% in large cap? Or are they true to label with, vast majority in mid cap? So these are telltale signs of a process driven fund house. So I would say go by the process, go by consistency. You can't go wrong. It's not possible to choose, the best performing fund house, but so what? If you're a long-term investor, some funds may give 1% above average, some funds may give 1% below average. It won't matter because you don't know which one is going to give that 1% more. So choose a consistent fund house. You will be a winner most of the times.
Okay, got it. Now, another thing, a lot of advisors like to take calls on where the markets are, and they recommend changes in the asset allocation. They recommend changes in the portfolio of their clients. What is your view on such an approach by distributors? Do you commend them, or what would you tell them?
You see, it's asset allocation is actually quite an important part of the financial advice. Okay. I think,
making a call on the asset allocation, sorry, Pradeep, making a change in the asset allocation or the portfolios based on your view of the market's ups and downs. That is what I'm alluding to. So one is not disputing the fact that asset allocation is the intrinsic part of an advisor's job.
Yeah. No,
but I think should an advisor be making tactical calls in asset allocation and portfolios based on market changes?
So I think that is a risky strategy because, as you know, getting into market timing is a very, very risky game. Most of the fund managers, even don't get it right. Most of the time, I would say it's something that, we try to avoid as a fund house, taking that timing call. So for advisors, I would say it's even more risky, because see, if people had taken a view, say after the market rallied in April and May, if somebody took a view that, the market has already gone up quite a bit from the lows in March and let me, move away from equity, they would be regretting today, right? So my advice is don't get into timing of the market in that sense. Your role, leave that call to the fund managers, okay? You can take an asset allocation call in the sense, I will explain this, Prem. Because if you had agreed on a 70-30 allocation between equity and fixed income for a client, okay, and suddenly you find that the client's equity exposure, because of market appreciation, has gone to 90, you can take a rebalancing call there, saying that this is above my tolerance level. My client doesn't need 90% in equity. Let me book some profits in equity and increase my fixed income allocation, which is fine. Because that will also ensure that the client's risk level, risk tolerance is not exceeded. Okay, you keep the asset allocation, within your tolerance band, and you will also ensure that the volatility is lower in the client's portfolio at a portfolio level. So that is a good thing to do. However, trying to time the market, in my view, is very risky.
Okay. Now, a distributor's business is so dependent on markets. Okay, while he can do asset allocation, what are the other risk mitigation strategies for his own business? We're not really now talking about the client's portfolio.
So the first thing, Prem, I would say, and in
because
my view,
his own fortunes are tied.
Yeah,
yes,
I agree. So for that, the strongest suggestion I have is that please invest in yourself. Okay, before you invest in funds or you invest in clients or anything, invest in yourself, because that is what is going to give the best returns. I'll elaborate this. For example, markets are bad. Maybe equity markets are bad. There are other opportunities. You should be in a position, for example, to advise the clients on the fixed income side. So today, and this point has been made by many people in the industry, that our advisor community is focused in a brutal majority on equity funds, on the equity side. If you talk, and that's true of our entire, the whole market itself. If you talk to man on the street, an average person, and ask about equity markets, they will probably give a view. You ask about fixed income, I'm pretty sure, 9 out of 10 people won't be able to tell you anything what's happening in the fixed income market. So there is a need, for example, to improve your knowledge. This is very important. So if you are going to a client and trying to, maintain your business in all market conditions, it is very important that you are well equipped to advise that client. First of all, because your fortunes are linked to that of your clients. So you should be able to protect the fortunes of your client, which means you should be able to move beyond equity and equity funds and talk about other markets. So for example, how many people know, about the spread between short-term and long-term government securities, the spread between, corporate bonds and government bonds? What is the historical spread? What is the possibility for, compression of spread? So many people, even those who are a little knowledgeable, their view stops with, a view on the interest rates. You have to go beyond that. Is this client, good enough for a medium duration fund or a dynamic bond fund, or should I keep this client only in liquid fund for the next 6 months? So it's very important that you upgrade your knowledge. For that, my suggestion is, if you have to go and do a course, please go and do that. If you need to, there are enough, there are like, there are programs like CFP and so many other programs are there in the country. There are management institutes who run programs. So please, invest in that, because you will get handsome returns with that investment. Knowledge, we are in a knowledge industry. We have to be knowledgeable. So I can again give you the example of one of the leading advisors from Delhi that I was talking to a couple of weeks back. So we were chatting, and he said, I'm reading this book by the former RBI Deputy Governor, Mr. Viral Acharya, The Quest for Financial Stability in India. So, I said, yeah, interesting. I am also reading this book. And we started talking about that book. But I said, what's your interest in this book? Okay. So he said, see, I am, servicing a lot of HNI clients. I need to, go above what they already know, to have an intelligent conversation with them and gain their respect. If, see, the minimum is you should at least know what is happening in the business papers. While that's not good enough, but at least that much you should know. You should be, many levels ahead of the person you are advising. See, if the knowledge level of the patient and that of the doctor are the same, the patient is not going to respect the doctor. And again, to give a comparison, if your job is just prescribing medicine, after coming to you once or twice, the next time he will go to the chemist directly, right? So it's very important to, give the confidence to the client and to confidence to the client that you know what you're doing. You are on top of things. Everything is not about funds. So see, selection of funds is the ultimate outcome. That's a final execution step. How do you lead the client towards that? So that is something you do. I was very impressed by this gentleman, investing in buying that book, investing his time in reading that book. It's not like a novel. It takes, quite a bit of concentration and effort to read that book. But he's doing it because it helps his business. So I think, there are things like this that we can do. And again, my very humble advice to everyone is, please don't depend on the AMCs to provide all this. Okay, I'm part of the AMC community. We will always do, the best that we can to help out the distributors. But, there is a limit to how much, am I audible? Somebody says no voice. Am I audible, Prem?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So, very often we get requests for conducting training programs, and we do. Okay. And, the larger AMCs may do more programs. But the point is, that's not enough. See, you choose what is the best thing for you. AMCs may do something, on a mass scale, looking at the least common denominator, something that is appealing to everybody. Okay. While you know what is best for you. If you had to, pay 20,000 rupees, 25,000 rupees for a training program, I would say just go ahead and do it. If there is something in one of the IIMs, or there are so many other institutes, you don't have to go to IIMs for everything. Okay. But, go there and get that training done, improve your knowledge, because this is probably going to be the only thing that will, help you in bad times. See, today, relationship, service, all that is taken for granted. Gone are the times when you could retain clients purely because of your relationship. Relationship, yes, it's a hygiene factor. You should maintain relationships, but most importantly, knowledge. So that's very important, because I was very amused actually, because we actually once, were trying to organize a training program at one of the management institutes for some of the distributors. So there are people from, different locations. So we said, we will organize a program, we'll organize a stay. But it didn't work out because many people insisted that you should also pay for our travel. So, that was beyond our budget. We said, this is something that we are doing primarily for your benefit. So please be willing to invest a little bit. Many people said they couldn't. I was disappointed, because in my view, you should be most interested in your own welfare. Okay. So investing in yourself is very important. And this lockdown time certainly gives us a great opportunity to do that, because, a lot of things can be done online, digitally. And people have the time, very often. So please do that. Okay.
So one risk mitigation strategy, there are 2 points that I got from your 2 points I got. One is that invest in yourself in acquiring, particularly in developing your knowledge. The second point you said was that you should not restrict yourself to equities.
Yes.
So can you elaborate on that point a little more? Because you seem to suggest that distributors, advisors should be looking at all asset categories.
Absolutely, Prem. Because again, see the thing is, there is great opportunity in fixed income funds. So unless you can give a comprehensive advice to your clients, what will happen is that, when there is opportunity in equity, or when the client is also positive on equity, and you are able to convince the client about equity, you will get business from the client. But what happens to the rest of the client's portfolio? You lose, control over that. That may go to, I don't know, fixed deposits. It may go to company deposits. It may go to all kinds of other instruments. They may simply buy real estate, which in my view is one of the poorest investment decisions you can make. But all that may happen, and your grip on the client will be weakened if you cannot talk beyond equity. So that's very important. That's why I said, that gaining knowledge, and whether it's by attending courses or reading books or reading magazines, whatever, is very, very crucial. Okay. So because the client needs to have the comfort that you know what you are doing. Just the way, we have blind faith in some doctors, you should give that faith to your clients. That's the most important.
Okay.
And one more.
No, I wanted you to actually, your views. I've always believed that 90% of the distributors sell equity 90% of the time.
True.
And this sets up their entire business for a lot of volatility during uncertain times. So if 90% of your portfolio is equities, when the markets fall, your clients are going to be very disappointed. Okay? Your own business is going to be impacted very directly because with the fall in the markets, your revenues will be hit because it is linked to the value of your own assets. Okay. Plus, you have clients who may not be happy with you, and which may take up a lot of your time and attention. Okay. And hence, it is good for clients, for distributors to have, a well-rounded book of business of their own, which means that their own business should have a good composition of both equity and debt. And given the fact that, I've done this study a few months back, and I'm sure it is relevant even now, the average ticket size of investment in debt is actually higher than that of equity.
Absolutely.
The actual duration, very paradoxically, debt is supposed to be for short term, equity is supposed to be for long term. But debt is held by a retail investor longer than equity. And with the difference between the commissions on equity and debt coming down so much, it makes eminent sense for distributors to look at debt more seriously. So they will have a more stable business, they will have a happier set of clients, and their business and hence will be much more stable. Okay, there's one thing that I wanted to ask you. You joined UTI 28 years back.
29.
Right? After you passed out from IIM Ahmedabad, you were in UTI for a very, very long time. You worked in both the Indian offices, and you had a fairly long stint even in UK. I think you were heading UTI International. Am I right?
That's right.
Okay. Now, during the early days, I think the job of a distributor was very clear. It was that most of the UTI schemes, if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, 92, 93, 94, were assured or quasi-assured or quasi-guaranteed. Am I correct?
Most of them.
Most of the business was coming through,
That's
most
right.
of the business at least was coming through products which had a guarantee or a quasi-guarantee.
True.
Okay. So during those days, the job of the advisor was very different. It was perhaps to communicate, you know, the returns to the client, uh, take the form, get it filled up, carry the check, because that time there was no online, there was no digital this thing. So I think it was in the current context where the role has changed, you know. I think there's more need for the advisors to be able to engage with their clients on a very continuous basis. 92 to 96, 97 was not a phase where you were required to really engage with the clients deeply. All you were required to do is present the product accurately. This is Raj Lakshmi. Raj Lakshmi has indicated an interest of so and so, and hence this is what the product is all about. Correct? And if there is some help required in filling up the check and all that, that was to be given. Why am I bringing this up? Because you've seen all these changes in the market, in the dynamics of the business, and hence the role of the advisor has also undergone a change. So earlier it was okay for you to collect forms, send them to UTI, and forget about it. If someone complained that my certificate is not come, go to UTI office, get it, and give it to the client. But now constant engagement is very important. Isn't that true?
Absolutely, Prem. Very interesting that you brought up that point. So here's my take on that, because there is something interesting that I have observed. So I started working in 91, and all my life, I have done only funds, different types of funds, but only funds. So if you remember, in the early 90s, okay, and 80s and all, they were called UTI agents. Now,
Right.
why is that? Why is that term significant? When you are an agent for somebody, your primary relationship is to your principal. Your
Principal,
principal
yes.
is the manufacturer, right?
Yeah.
Now, then we had distributor, and today we are talking about advisor. Now, when you say you are an advisor, who are you an advisor to? You are advisor to your client. Your principal relationship today is with your client. So from being an agent of the manufacturer, you have moved towards being an advisor to your client. So this is the transition that has happened over the last 25 years or so. And this is very important.
Okay.
Because when your principal engagement is with your client, it's very important that you continuously engage with the client. Now, there are many ways of doing this. Okay, so for example, what I have with my advisor is, and I have two advisors actually for different reasons. We have a fixed frequency of engagement. There is a calendar. Okay, in that, so somewhere it's once in 6 months, somewhere it's once in a year. We review the portfolio. And when we review the portfolio, what we review is not the performance of the fund. What we review is to see where we are on our path to achieving the goals we had set. So if we are on the right track, we say, yeah, everything is fine. We just, continue. Sometimes there has been, deviations required. My advisor has, told me that your monthly expenditure is too much. You should cut down a bit. You should save a little more if you want to achieve this goal. And I have tried to do that. So this kind of fine tuning happens. Okay. Now, another time when I got some extra money, again, the advisor came in and, told me, yeah, how it can be deployed. On another occasion, there was another need, which came a kind of goal, which came up, in which I would need money in 2 years' time. He came up with a plan for that. So we have these, interactions at regular frequency, apart from, they calling up and, talking to me when something out of the ordinary happens. Now, my other advisor, when our initial goals were met, again, we sat down, we reworked our strategy, we prepared new goals, we changed our allocation, and we are again now continuing with the same strategy. So having that kind of constant engagement is important. You cannot be talking to your clients only when you have something to sell, because then you are only a salesman, which is not really going to be great in building up a long-term robust business. So please put a calendar for interacting with all your clients. It can be once in a year, it can be once in a week, whatever, depending on the nature of the client and the nature of the investments, size of the investments, etc. Yes, there will be very big clients who may want you to, call up every day, every week. Yeah, do that. But it is also important to choose your clients wisely. Please don't accept every business that comes your way. There will be some clients who will give you grief. They may give you commission, but they will also give you a lot of grief in future. You should know when to say no. For example, if somebody says, I am coming to you, find a way where I can give, 10% guaranteed return. You should immediately say no. There is nothing you can do about it. Our expectation is that why 10%? He'll probably make 15%. But the point is that if the client is not willing to accept a scenario where his returns may be 8%, or in one particular year or for a short period, it may go down. If the client is not willing to accept such a situation, it is better to state it upfront and say no to the client. So, deciding what not to do sometimes can be more important than deciding what to do. So, for example, as a fund house, we have decided that, we will not play momentum. So it may mean that, when the momentum is on, our funds may underperform, but that's a call we have taken. Our investors and our distributors know that Union Mutual Fund will not play momentum. We will not try to time the market. So similarly, you should build up, each advisor should build up a reputation in the market about what she or he stands for. Okay, if you build up a reputation of being somebody who is a punter in the market and help you, and can tell people, which fund will go up in the next 1 month, 3 months, etc., only that type of clients will come to you. The kind of business that we are talking about, the all-weather business, where you grow the business irrespective of market conditions, if that has to happen, you should choose your clients also carefully. So certain types of clients with short-term view, people who cannot accept volatility in the market, please state upfront that you cannot help them, and mutual funds are not for such clients. So in my view, that's very important in engaging with the clients. Second is, where the constant engagement also helps is in your asset allocation. So I talked about asset allocation earlier. So wherever rebalancing is required, again, how do you track? It's very important. And the basic thing that everybody can do is put a calendar. Once in 3 months, once in 6 months, it can be once in a year, whenever. Please put a frequency and check the asset allocation. Unless, of course, something very significant happens on the way. So for example, at the end of March, if you had checked the asset allocation of your clients, many people would have found that your clients have become suddenly underexposed in equity because the equity markets crashed. At that time, if you were able to shift some money from other asset classes to equity for the purpose of rebalancing, look how much your clients would have benefited by now. So that is the advantage of rebalancing, asset rebalancing. So the constant engagement is important. Apart from your meetings, of course, there are basic things which I'm sure most people do about, providing electronic execution facilities, providing opportunities for them to check their portfolio valuations on a continuous basis, and sending regular communication about their views on what's happening in the industry, etc. Now, I must also say that be careful about information overload. Okay, it's important to know what is happening, but at one level, you should really focus on your clients. See, many people get into this habit of academic discussions and gaining a lot of academic knowledge. See, you should focus on what is relevant for your business and for your clients. So, people, when we talk to some advisors, we get into discussions like, okay, what is the alpha? What is the allocation? What is this ratio? What is that ratio? Beyond a point, you have to ask, does any of it help your client? If it doesn't help your client, please don't waste your time on those things. See, you can have intellectual satisfaction, like, compared to many other IFAs, I know this ratio, I know that ratio. It's all fine. Sit and calculate by all means. But time is a limited commodity, and use it wisely on things that really matter is okay. What I would say.
Okay. Now, one question that often comes up is the mindset and the temperament of the advisor is very important when they're dealing with markets. Because in booming markets, everyone is a tiger. But when the markets fall, that is when, the mettle of the fund managers and the advisors and everyone in the ecosystem is tested. Given that you have 3 decades of experience in the capital markets, what is your suggestion on to distributors? Many of them may not even have seen a full cycle as yet.
So, one thing is that when we get into investments, obviously we tell everybody that it's a long-term journey. There can be ups and downs, volatility, etc. But until they actually witness volatility, many people think that it's only one of those jargons that we use. Okay, so it's like going on a journey, Prem. I'll again go back to my analogy. Okay, and the advisor is your guide on the way. On a good road, when the weather is good, there is broad daylight, everything, you can walk on your own. You can run. Everything is fine. But when you need an advisor, that is when there is a storm, when it's dark, there is no light, okay, rain, lightning, all those conditions can come. You don't know your way. When you are stuck not knowing your way, that is a time you need advisor to come and hold your hand and say that, don't worry. I am there. I have traveled this path, 100 times. I know what is at the end of this. This too shall pass. If you stay put, everything will be fine. So how did my advisor give me that confidence? He opened up his portfolio. He said, in the last 10 years or, 15 years, all this has happened to my portfolio and I have still made this much money. Now look at it, Prem, in the last 20 years, what all haven't we seen? We have seen, the tech boom, tech bust. We saw the Ketan Parekh scam. We saw 9/11. After that, we saw when the market, after the UPA got elected, one day the market, fell by 14% or so. Then, we had a big boom. Then we had global financial crisis. We have had all kinds of things. Who are the people who have made money? The people who stayed. Okay, they are the ones who have made maximum money. People who panicked, people who reacted to every event in the market have by and large lost out. Okay, like if you had taken a view in March when the market crashed that this is the end of the world, because as far as you can see, it's all gloom and doom. Economy is going to be in bad shape, etc., etc. But an experienced advisor would have told you that, boss, this has happened again. This is not the first crisis that we have seen. Look at what happened in 2008. Look at what happened in 2004. Look at what happened in 2001. There have been numerous occasions when the market has been hit big time by one event or the other, and it bounces back. We need to keep faith. If you are investing in Indian equity, we need to keep our faith in the country. Country prosper, will the economy grow. If it grows, everybody will make money from equity markets. Everybody will make money from debt markets also. So the important thing is walk the talk. If you are telling people, excuse me, to stay invested, be willing to demonstrate that you are doing the same. Okay, be willing to open up your portfolio. What did you do when there was a crisis in the past? What are you doing in this crisis? I think that is probably the best way to convince your clients.
Okay.
Whenever
I'll
you
ask
can.
you a question. I'll ask you a question which is somewhat related to this. How do you deal with redemption pressure from your clients? You know, when the markets are going bad, there's a lot of pressure from clients to redeem, move to safer assets. At that point of time, what would be your advice?
So the genuine advice you can give to your clients, you know, if they say they are leaving, they want to redeem because the market is going down. If it is a question where they genuinely need the cash, see, for example, during this crisis, this lockdown, there were many people who lost their jobs, or you know, there were people running small businesses who faced cash flow problems. They needed the money, and if they really needed the money, mutual funds were one of the most liquid, easily and cashable investments. And you know, if they genuinely needed the money, I think as an advisor, it's your role to help them to encash, because we cannot say that, you know, just because it is our business and the more business the better for us, we cannot hold on to clients assets all the time. I think it is, you know, if we allow people to get the benefit of investing in mutual funds, because unless you can enjoy this money someday, and when you really need the money, if it doesn't come in handy, what's the purpose of investment? So I think first and foremost, you have to understand where the client is coming from. Is it a genuine, you know, liquidity need that the client has? And if you have done your job properly as an advisor, you should have first got the client to create a contingency fund before starting the long-term goals, etc. Now, if that contingency fund is exhausted or it's not there, and you know, your regular investments are the only thing available, probably you'll need to let the client take that money back. But if you actually help him to do that, when better times comes, you know, when the client gets his cash flow back, the client will come back to you. They will remember that. So that's one. But if it is a client who is panicking just because the market is going down, I think, you know, you need to really give some, you know, proper perspective on this. You see, anything else in our life, you know, whether it's real estate or car or clothes, whatever, gold, whatever, we buy more when the prices are low. Why is it that, you know, we take a contrary view when it comes to equity? Everything else we buy when there is a sale. Why can't we buy equity when it's on sale? What sense does it make to go and sell when the price is low? This is, you know, counterintuitive. That's one. Two, again, you know, you can only give them examples, you know, illustrations and actual examples of what has happened to people's portfolio, including your own portfolio. How by staying invested during difficult times or adding to your investment in difficult times, how you have benefited. In my view, that is the best counter that you can give. You know, it's like saying, I have traveled this path, you know, don't worry. I know this road very well. I have driven this road, you know, 100 times. Nothing happens. Trust me. And if you can develop that trust by showing with actual examples that, you know, you have benefited by staying invested, this is what you have done, or this is what, you know, some other successful investor has done. I think most investors would, you know, get convinced. But the other side of it, Prem, is that if you have too many clients who are only fair weather people that, you know, will be with you only for bull market, you need to really revisit your business model about the kind of clients you have. I'm going back to my earlier point that choose your clients wisely. Even if you
Yes,
have fewer
absolutely.
clients, choose them wisely.
Okay. Okay, great. Now, you know, there are lots of comments and questions coming. So, appreciate your frank and forthright views. Thanks, Pradeep Kumar sir. This is from Vijay Kumar.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's some questions also. So, let me read out the questions to you. One is, uh, you said that uh, uh, advisors, distributors should uh, not look at just the best performing funds. They should look at things like goal planning and asset allocation and things like that. Now, there is a question uh, saying that, is this currently allowed by SEBI? Because there seems to be some confusion about what can be done by an advisor and what can be done only by a distributor. So, do you have any views on this,
See, obviously,
Pradeep?
we'll have to work within the limits of the regulation. That's important. But in my view, there are ways of doing this without breaking the regulation. Definitely. Okay. If that means, you know, having an RIA license, yes, you must do that. But in my view, there is enough scope within the MFD framework as well. Whatever I said, a lot of it can be done even within the MFD framework. Okay, it's not all about writing down or what is there on paper. A lot of things can be achieved. That's my view.
Okay. Okay. So, uh, actually, I'll read out the full question is uh, are we allowed to advise on goals plannings or are we restricted to advise only on products? Wanted to know how to make it. I have mostly retail clients, in which case I wanted to add a couple of things. One is that the operational aspect of the latest RIA rules have not been announced as yet. So there could be a change in what distributors can do and what advisors can do. Having said that, I think Ritesh, one of the most important responsibilities which is being defined by for distributors is that they have to ensure investment suitability. And I think we would all agree that in defining the investment suitability, you need to understand the risk profile of your client. You need to understand his aspirations, and you need to know what is his time frame and so on and so forth. So I think in fact, this is something which you are required to even document properly. So I think if I were in your place, Ritesh, I would definitely continue to do what I'm doing, and uh, unless and until, of course, the new set of regulations, which is expected any day now, because the new set of regulations, or at least the operational part of the new regulations, is expected any day now, because from it becomes effective from the 1st of October. And today we are on 21st of September, so we have only 9 days. So I'm sure it will come out any day,
Yes.
maybe even today.
And
So,
I agree with you, Prem, that even within the MFD framework, if you have to do your job properly, a lot of the stuff that we
yes,
discuss
it is
is
required of you. Yes. Investment suitability.
exactly.
I think that is the word used by the regulator, if my
Yes,
memory serves me right. And
you're right.
investment suitability obviously cannot be done without looking at the risk profile, looking at the time frame, looking at the goals, and perhaps even the other investments of the client. So that would require you to take a more holistic view of his investments. Okay. Uh, Now, there's one question which is from Rigved. And now, Rigved is saying that SEBI has formulated certain regulations on the multi-cap funds. Uh, Certain AMCs are taking a non-conventional strategy, which is they're taking what is called a covered call strategy. Uh, so he wants to know, Pradeep, your view on such unconventional strategy. So,
Simple rule, Prem. Don't buy anything which you don't understand. If,
okay,
as a distributor, you understand what that strategy is, you are comfortable, fine. If you
okay,
don't understand what it is, don't go anywhere near it.
okay,
Okay, because there are enough simple things, for you to invest in. There is no need for, see, I mean, since this point has been raised on the multi-cap funds.
Yeah.
Okay. Our view is that there is no need to panic. You know, the last word on this has not been said. There is a lot going on. There is engagement between AMFI and SEBI. As SEBI itself said, you know, there are multiple options available to AMCs. So we don't need to do any gymnastics at this stage. You know, stay calm. We will find, you know, simple solutions which work in the interest of investors. Our primary focus should be the investor. And if you take care of the investor, everything else will fall in place. So no need to really, you know, get into, you know, exotic things at this stage is my view.
Okay. But would you know what is a covered call strategy?
I won't.
I don't know.
I don't know enough to talk to this audience. Okay. I know broadly what it is, but not enough to talk to the audience.
Okay. Okay. Then okay. Now one of the questions from a gentleman called Kukreti is that a union AMC offers only a fixed slab of commission irrespective of size and who it is. So you offer the same rate to everyone regardless of size and the quantum of business. Is that correct?
Well, yes, that's correct today. Again, I'll give you a historic perspective on that, because we really started working actively with the IFI community and started working outside of our parent bank network only about 3 years back. Okay. We don't know, you know, who is going to be category A for us and category B for us. Every application is important for us. Every distributor is important for us. You know, 5,000 rupees coming from distributor A is as valuable as 5,000 rupees coming from another distributor, as far as we are concerned. And our view is that every distributor has to work hard even to get that 5,000 rupees. So we are not taking a call at this stage that, you know, somebody deserves more for that 5,000 rupees compared to somebody else. At this stage, our view is that every distributor is important for us, and it's how much business they get is you know, that is what is more important compared to who brings it. Now, I know that, you know, it may not be acceptable to everybody in the market. We have got into trouble for taking a stance. There are people who have refused to work with us because we are offering, you know, the same commission to everybody in the market. So yeah, that's unfortunate, but that's a call that our AMC has taken. And I told you why we have taken that stance. Okay. Because, you know, see, we are offering very competitive commission. We may or may not be the best in the market, but we are very competitive. I know that. People accept that. But then, you know, some people have taken a view that it's not enough. If you are paying me competitive commission, you should pay less to others. So that is, you know, difficult for us at this stage. I'm not saying that, you know, this will never change, because never is a very, very long time. But today, that's our view. At this stage of our evolution as a company, we are not inclined to differentiate. Now, I'm not ruling out, you know, changes tomorrow. We'll see how it happens. But we will always offer competitive commission. I think there was some question about debt funds, Prem.
Yeah. So there is a question which says that even debt funds have become scary. So what's your view on this now? After the you know, recent or not so recent actually anymore incidents. What's your take on debt funds?
So debt funds are fantastic products. Okay, again, choose them wisely. And I'm going back to the point that I made earlier. You should have sufficient knowledge about debt funds. In fact, fixed income is a more complex subject compared to equity. So when you choose a debt fund, you know, you should know what you are getting into. What is the objective, right? What is the difference between an ultra short-term fund a short-term fund, a medium duration fund, and a GSEC fund. People, for example, just to give you a simple example, many people, invest in GSEC funds thinking that, these are absolutely safe. Now, the fact is that GSEC funds are among the most volatile of debt funds. You don't have a credit risk, but you have a significant interest rate risk. So unless you are willing to stay invested for a long time, and long time, can be a really long time, more than 5 years for GSEC funds to, derive optimum returns. So if you choose fixed income funds wisely, you have nothing to fear. They are a great tool and should be an integral part of the portfolio for clients. So you can have, 70, 30, 80, 20, 50, 50 allocation to fixed income and equity, depending on the nature of the client and, their life stage, etc. But be willing to understand what you're getting into. And that is important. I think if you choose carefully, debt funds are great for your customers. Okay, but be willing to accept the risk. See, you cannot, I said earlier, if everybody else in the market is giving 8%, and if one fund is giving 12%, and if you chase the returns without understanding where that returns is coming from, you may get into trouble. And one more point I'll make about fixed income, products. Unlike equity, there is really not much scope for generating big alpha in fixed income. See, in equity, it's possible that average returns from the category is, say, 12%, and there is a fund which gives 20% or 25%. And the fund manager may say that, I had great research team. We were able to pick up a lot of multi-baggers. We discovered some, small cap stocks which did fantastically well. I generated alpha. All this is possible. Probable or not is a different issue. It's possible, theoretically at least. In fixed income, it's not even theoretically possible. In fixed income, there are only two ways to produce excess returns, okay, for average. One is the credit calls. You buy papers which are of lower credit quality. In fixed income, the risk-reward ratio is very linear in the sense that in the same category, say you take, 3-year bonds. If one bond is giving, 6%, another one is giving 6.5, 100% guaranteed, the 6.5 bond is more risky. There is no other reason why they are paying you 6.5. Because this is given by the company. No company gives you higher interest unless, they are compelled to give because that paper is perceived as more risky by the market. So the main equation in fixed income is of risk return. Higher returns, higher risk. So, this is a fundamental thing you need to understand. Second way in which people generate excess returns is by playing on the duration. You take a view on interest rate, you take a view on the market, and accordingly you adjust your duration. So if your view on the market is positive, you take a higher duration, longer modified duration, higher modified duration. If your call goes right, you will make more money, you will make more returns. But none of it is going to give, this massive alpha, like everybody gives 10% and I'll give it 20%. That's not going to happen. If somebody gives that, please ask the question where it is coming from. So this is a fundamental thing on fixed income. And very often, see, we forget our lessons. Now, with whatever happened recently, yes, people have a lot of memory. Recently 6 months, people have started forgetting. Things happened in 2008. We forgot that. If we remember the lessons of 2008, we would have done better, right? So the problem is, we tend to forget the lessons we learned from each market cycle or each market episode. So please remember, maybe we should write it down and, you should, have a documented strategy with your customer so that your customer doesn't panic. Tell them, this is what we are going to do. If market falls, this is what we will do. If interest rate falls, this is what we will do. Maybe you should have a documented strategy with your client. And when your client comes and panics, you can show him that, this is what we agreed. This is not a surprise. We told you this can happen. Let's sit down and talk. Okay. Another point, Prem, on a slightly different area, but talking about, how to build a sustainable business, which was our original topic. One area which many people can, do better is by collaboration. See, one is you can collaborate with other distributors. I know cases where, say this is one set of 12 IFIs who individually were not very big. They were about, say, 50 crores, that types, 50 crores to 100 crores. 12 of them collaborated with a combined AUM of 1,000 crores. Excuse me. And now, the beauty is that their cost has come down by 50% because they share overheads. Okay, a lot of common expenses are shared. So there is economies of scale. And of course, they have their own client sets. So that has helped them a lot. Similarly, clients are also looking for help, not just with mutual funds. See, as a customer, I'll tell you, my own case. See, through my mutual fund advisor, I have also done life insurance. I have done home insurance. If he doesn't do life insurance directly, he has a friend, a kind of loose collaborator who does life insurance. So this helps me because my faith is in my advisor, my distributor, but he is able to provide this entire range of services to me. I think if we can collaborate with people who are experts in other areas, one is you can collaborate with other IFIs and develop economies of scale. Two, you can collaborate with people who are specialists in life insurance, people who are specialists in perhaps general insurance, people who are very good in specializing in small savings. So all this. So collectively, you have a complete grip on your client. And one more thing one more point I would like to make is also think about succession planning. Don't be seen as a one-man operation, because at some stage, the client is going to start wondering, can I just depend on this one guy forever? Like, the client is not immortal. The distributor is also not immortal. Okay. So one is you should help the client with succession planning, but at the same time, give the comfort to the client that whether I am here or not, your investments are safe. So a collaboration also helps from that point of view, because the client will have the comfort that yes, there is a bunch of people. There's not just one guy. Okay, if he is not available, incapacitated, for example, God forbid, for 6 months, there are other people I can talk to who will help me out. So I think these are some of the tips which will help you to build a sustainable business.
Okay. Now we have time for 3 more questions, but we will keep the answers very brief. So one question from Harsha is that the yields on debt funds have come down a lot. And in fact, the fixed deposit rates of some of the safest banks are a little higher. So is it advisable to recommend debt funds for 1 or 2 years time frame? What's your view?
I think there are 2 ways in which you make returns from a debt fund. Okay, one is the yield, the other is the yield compression, the mark-to-market gain. So today the yields are low. I would not. Sometimes perhaps it's right. It may at times be less than the FD rates of banks. Second is, I told you in the beginning itself that our view on the market, on the interest rates, is that the interest rates will soften. It will come down further. So you can also expect returns from the fall in interest rates, the compression of spreads also. So it's not just the yield. On top of that, you will have mark-to-market gains. So put together, you should be able to make good returns from good quality bond funds over the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, great. Now, another question is that ETFs, which are very low margin products, they're becoming very important. And there is a lot of online players. And with mutual funds being sold, as this query comes from Charanjit Batra, that with DMAT mode investments and low margin ETFs, what is the future of the mutual fund distributors?
You see, the future of distributor is extremely bright in my view. There's no need to worry about that. Okay, there are millions of people who have the money and who need the help of distributors. So don't worry about that. Okay, ETF is not the first thing to challenge it. ETF is a product which is very popular in some of the developed markets because they have become more mature and the scope for beating the market, beating the index is very little there. Most of the fund managers are actually underperforming the benchmark. In such a situation, a low cost product that simply tracks the index has some attraction. We are in a market where we are far from being a perfect market. There is enough scope for generating alpha, beating the benchmark. Active fund managers after the fees are still producing outperformance. So I don't think we need to worry too much about ETFs eating into the business of distributors. And again, we are in a country where the penetration of demat accounts is not enough to threaten the business of mutual fund distributors. So don't worry about that. I don't think that's going to happen in the foreseeable future. Someday, yes, it may happen, but that's a long way.
Okay. One final question is, do you know of any debt fund, any book on debt funds, which
Yeah,
can make people knowledgeable overnight?
I will get suggestion of 2 3 books and mail you, Prem. You can share it with
Okay.
Mr. Kichar.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think Jagdish Kitcher wanted that.
Yeah,
Then in that case, can we take one more question?
yeah, sure.
Uh, uh, your views on banking and PSU debt funds and arbitrage funds.
So these are different types of funds and for different products, obviously. So banking and PSU debt funds, it's a good category right now. As I mentioned earlier, um, the view on the interest rates is positive. So we are generally positive on bond funds. Okay, and banking and PSU has the additional advantage that from a credit point of view, they are less risky. Okay, again, look at the portfolio very carefully. There have been funds, banking and PSU funds, in which significant exposure to NBFCs have been taken in the past. So be very careful about what kind of portfolio you are getting into. Uh, it should be purely banking and PSU. So in that case, it's a good quality, good product to have for the next 2 years or 3 years. Um, the similar returns that we told you about bond funds, you can expect from that. But anything less risky is also likely to produce less returns. So that's in fixed income, it's a linear equation. Arbitrage funds, it's a very interesting category, and I really like that. I'm glad that this question was asked because especially for kind of short-term parking, it has become a very popular product because again, if it's a pure arbitrage fund, it's one of the least risky products that you can get because you're not taking a directional call on the market. What does it mean, directional call? It doesn't matter whether the market is going up or down. This behaves more like a fixed income product and produces a return of a fixed income product. Okay, but the beauty is that you get equity taxation. So even if you're selling after say 6 months, your taxation is only 15%. If you're selling long term after 1 year, you pay only 10% long term capital gains if you're above that 1 lakh limit. If you had invested in a fixed income product, whether it's liquid or ultra short term or whatever, you would be paying the full tax on that at the top of the bracket. So it is very tax efficient. It's very relatively very low risk. The only advice I would give is that invest in arbitrage funds only if you can stay invested for at least 3 months. See, if you have a 1 month view, 2 month view, you are better off going into a liquid fund or an overnight fund. Because in the short term, returns from arbitrage funds can be subdued. In a rare case, it can even be negative. But over 3 months, it will even out, and you can expect respectable returns in line with fixed income funds.
Okay. Uh, so with this, friends, we've coming to the end of this wonderful session. Thanks for being here with us. I hope all of you enjoyed. I hope all of you took out, according to I've heard Pradeep, and I think all his points regarding how do you insulate your business from market vagaries are all well taken. So just to sum up, develop knowledge, offer a rounded basket of products, look at asset allocation for your clients, look carefully at developing partnerships with other people so that your business is more sustainable, it is stronger, you can reduce costs, and it is eventually more profitable for you. Another important point which Pradeep made was engage with your clients a lot more intensively. All in all, wonderful points made by you, Pradeep. So thank you for being with us, and thank you, audience, for being with us.
Thank you, Prem, and thank you, audience. Really
Yeah.
appreciate this opportunity. Enjoyed the conversation. I hope you liked it as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
So stay safe, stay healthy, and be prosperous. With that wish, we come to an end. Thank you so much.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.